But first, what I want to do is go through some of the first tuning changes we are getting in the War Within. So today we're going to start off with some reading some WoWhead articles, and we're going to figure out what's changing. So let's get into it. So first we've got classes. We've got Death Knight. Frost Strike damage reduced by 6%. Obliterate damage reduced by 6%. Icy Death Torrent damage reduced by 10%. And Glacial Advanced damage reduced by 10%. DKs were doing a ton of damage. I kind of expected them to get nerfed solely because they have such little work to get that damage. And not necessarily saying that that's like the reason to be nerfed, but I think it does help when Obliterate's doing 90% or 60% of your damage, and it's like an insane amount of DPS. And I guess every class kind of has their main move, but I feel like they were getting a lot of damage out of very simple, couple buttons. And I would have hoped that they would have not just nerfed everything, but spread it out across a couple different moves so that each part of the rotation had a part in the total DPS, rather than like Obliterate just being like ahead by a landslide, because then it would have just felt better to press other buttons. So I kind of wish they had done that instead of the straight nerf. It's probably like a 4% overall nerf, which I don't think knocks them out of like the top 5 for DPS, but it does sting a little bit. All right, let's go to Balance Druid. Umbral Intensity increases the damage of Wrath by 20/40%, was 25. What's up, Meds? Was 25/50%, so that's a nerf to the damage of Wrath. And Starfire by 15/30 was 50%. So did Balance really need any kind of nerf here? I don't think Balance was going crazy. Star Surge damage increased by 12%. Starfall damage increased by 20%. It's good for their AoE. Harmony of the Heavens increases Eclipse power by 2% per proc, was 6%, or max 6% was 1%, and max 5. Okay, so they got some buffs. They just got some They just got a nerf to their builder, essentially. Ugh. So Wrath and Starfire do a little less damage. But their AoE, their single target, and their Harmony of the Heavens buff all do a little bit more damage, a little bit bigger buff. So that's okay. This is really where most of your damage comes from. That's just kind of builders to get into to get some what's it called? Whatever their energy source is, and to get into Eclipse. But I think this is Starfall damage increased by 20%. Might be really nice in AoE. They already did good AoE damage. Their single target was kind of lacking. So I'm hoping Star Surge getting increases is going to help that out. Blood Talons and Lion Strength now also increases the damage of Rampant Ferocity. That's cool. Yeah, Blood Talons and Lion Strength is really good. Blood Talons was fun to play because you have to rotate through. It's almost like a Monk Mastery where you can't hit the same button twice. And you got to build up to 3 every time and keep that like stack going. So I liked playing Blood Talons. That was actually fun. All right, Evoker. Devastation. Damage of all spells and abilities increased by 6%. That's pretty big. Firestorm damage increased by 20%. That's pretty big. Firestorm damage reduced to 10 seconds was 12. I think that's fine with the 20% change. That's actually pretty hefty buffs for Devastation Evoker. The flat 6% across the board, probably going to feel really good. I didn't see a ton of them. Mainly they were playing Og because Og kind of got the hot thing, but then Og kind of fell apart too. So I just haven't really seen any Evokers. So I'm curious if we'll start seeing some more of them now with these buffs. And then we have for Flame Shaper, engulf damage increased by 30%. That's actually, I'm not a big Evoker player. I've only played it a little bit on the beta. But engulf, anything getting increased by 30% always feels like it's a good buff. All right, so we got Hunter with Pack Leader. Vicious Hunt damage increased by 10% for Beast Mastery. Vicious Hunt damage decreased by 10% for Survival. When Vicious Hunt's damage reaches a certain point, it can cause Kill Command to dominate Survival's rotation. This adjustment and subsequent compensation are meant to ensure Pack Leader Survival Hunters are utilizing other tools. See, this is kind of what I expected them to do with Frost. Have like reduce their main ability and then bring up their other abilities. How the Pack critical strike damage bonus increased to 5%. For Beast Mastery was 3%. Okay. That's damage bonus. I thought it was just crit bonus, like actual critical strike. That's still pretty good. How of the Pack critical strike damage bonus increased to 11% for survival. That's pretty good. Furious Assault damage bonus increased to 60%. Oh, that's actually huge. It got doubled. That's a 100% increase in Furious Assault damage. That's actually pretty hefty. Cull the Herd damage over time increases by 60% again. So they got two abilities got buffed 100%. That's kind of crazy. I wonder if I know that in my guild somebody was playing survival and they ran a dungeon and they were like 20 eye levels behind the other DPS and they were keeping up. So and he was like, survival's broken, man. So survival might be really strong right now. It was really strong in the beta. When it first started, it was insane. And then they changed some things and then they changed some things back and it kind of just faded into the background. But I don't think it ever was bad. I think it just lost its spot in the limelight. But it looks like it's probably going to be really good again. Mage, Blizzard's favorite class. Living bomb damage increased by 30%. Anything getting increased by 30% is hefty. That's pretty massive. Pyroblast damage increased by 5%. That's probably pretty big. Pyroblast is a lot of damage. Even 5% is hefty amount. Flame Strike damage increased by 10%. I never played Flame Strike, but I also am not a mage by any stretch of the means. So I always played like the non-Flame Strike build, at least in beta, and I only played it for like a day. But damage increased to fire. Fire's been in a bad spot, so this is actually really good. I like when classes have multiple specs they can play and not be like turned down because of it. So I like when they bring up the weaker specs. Don't nerf the good ones, bring up the weaker ones. Frostfire, bolt damage increased by 25% for fire. Okay, so that's like their main builder, I think, or like main ability. 25% increase, that's pretty good. And then Sun Fury, burden of power can no longer be double dipped by spell queuing. I don't know what that is, but it sounds like it's gonna hurt. Arcane Phoenix damage dealt reduced by 10% for Arcane. Okay. Arcane soul base duration reduced to 2 seconds was 3. Okay, so Arcane took some nerfs. I mean, they're still probably strong, but 10% damage reduction for the Arcane Phoenix probably feel it a little bit. I don't know how much it's actually going to be, but I think probably burden of power not being double dipped by spell queuing is probably more hindering to them. All right, now we got Rep Pally. Mastery, High Lord's Judgment reduced by 10%. For example, at level 80, 180 mastery rating now grants 1.3% mastery was 1.5. Okay. All holy spell damage increased by 5%. I feel like Red Pallies were kind of pumping. Like they weren't great single target. Their AoE Wake of Ashes was fucking smashing things. So we'll see if I haven't played with one in a minute, but when I did play with one, I felt like I was always fighting for threat because of how much upfront damage they had with their blast. But I know that they did have a bug where they could pretty much have like infinity wings. So they lost that, and maybe that's why I stopped seeing them. But spell damage increased, all holy spell damage increased by 5%. That's good for Ret Pallies. Priest. Okay, we got Discipline Priests. Discipline Priests were solid in raid, but needed some work in Mythic Plus. So let's say Oracle Discipline Priest preventative measures now increase power word shield absorption by 40%. Was 25%. I know Oracle was pretty bad. I think Oracle was bad. Maybe it was, I don't know. I'd have to watch some Jack videos. But increasing power word shield absorption by 40%, that's a nearly double. That's huge. Atonement healing increased by 100% outside of raid was 70%. That's massive. That's what Discipline Priest needed for Mythic Plus. That's a 30% increase to their healing. Because Atonement is just going to be like a 70% outside of raid was kind of weak. Atonement healing increased by 100%. That's huge. That's huge. So we might see some Disc Priests in Mythic Plus now. We'll have to see how it plays out. Fixed an issue where Atonement critical healing was not increased by the correct amount outside of raid. Okay. Shadow Word, Pain, and Purge the Wicked damage increased by 20%. That's big too. Because you're just dotting everything up with Purge the Wicked. So that's going to, between that and the 30% increase to your healing, to your Atonement healing, because that's what it is. It's a 30% increase to Atonement healing. That's really good. Shadow, Void Weaver, Shadow Priest, Void Blast damage increased by 20%. That's nice. That's a good little buff for Shadow Priest. All right, we got elemental. Elemental overloads bonus to all elemental. Hold on. Mastery. Elemental overlords. I want to say overlord. Mastery. Elemental overloads bonus to all elemental and physical damage increased by 35%, but all damage reduced by 6%. Why are they nerfing elemental still? Tempest now deals 65% of its damage to enemies near its primary target was 50. That's going to be good for their AoE, and it reduces. That's probably fine. I think that trade-off is okay because you're not doing big pulls really. So I think that the trade-off is you'll feel it now because we are doing bigger pulls in heroic, but in Mythic Plus you won't really. I think that's a fine trade-off. Enhancement, all damage reduced by 4%. That sucks. I thought when I first quick read it, I thought it said increased. So that's unfortunate. Elemental blast damage increased by 12%. Nice little jump. So same thing with Tempest. Totemic. Tremor damage increased by 10%. Searing volley damage increased by 80%. I don't know. I need some more energy. I don't know how. I never played Totemic when I tried out Enhancement. I only played Stormbringer. So I'm curious how big of a jump this is. But Enhancement was doing pretty good before, so they're probably fine. All right. Warlock. Simple. All abilities increased by 5% for destruction. That's fine. I think Destro was probably the starting good one, and then ended off fairly weak with the Aflock and Demolock kind of just pumping off with dialysis. Diabolus. Jeez, these hero talents. But yeah, the rest of the stuff's player versus player. That's not going to be me. That's going to be anybody else who PvPs. But yeah, so this is the first tuning change. I think most of them are fine. None of them seemed like devastating. I think the Frost Death Knight probably took the brunt of it, but I think overall it's probably pretty fine. I think balanced druids are probably okay with it. I mean, they were already in a bad spot before. I think they were kind of dooming really hard. But I think that'll help their single target, help their AoE. Survival Hunter's probably going to be feeling real good right now. Fire Mage is probably feeling better. Disc Priest is definitely going to feel better in Mythic Plus. I think Disc Priest getting the 30% increase their atonement healing. Jack's probably pumped. Shaman kind of just up and downs on stuff. The 4% is not as bad as I think people think. All damage reduced by 6% might be kind of tough. But yeah, overall, not bad changes. We'll see if they come out with some more tuning stuff. I know we're going to get a ton of tuning going into Heroic Week, but that's expected, and we'll keep updates on that. So, all right. So today,